I rejected Zhou Shu under the pretext of being an alpha. Consequently, the following day during my overtime at the hospital, I encountered him there for a checkup. Congratulations, sir. You are pregnant. I abruptly halted in my tracks, only to hear him coldly utter, assist me in terminating it, and while you're at it, please schedule a procedure to remove the gland. He does not favor alphas, nor will he embrace this unforeseen child. My goodness. Calm yourself, will you? 01. I abruptly pushed the door open, facing the man on the examination bed. He was taken aback upon seeing me, then quickly turned his head away. 2 large water stains adorned the cuffs of his sleeves. He was crying. I was momentarily astonished by this scene. After all, I had never witnessed him shed tears before. Surely, the influence of pregnancy hormones had taken its toll. I retrieved the medical records from my colleague and grasped Zhou Shu's wrist, hastily making my way outside. I could hear him struggling behind me. His wrist twisted with considerable force, yet I held it firmly. We entered the elevator just as I finished reviewing the health report. I pressed the button for the basement level. Gu Jian, this is kidnapping. I will file a complaint against you at the hospital. I will definitely file a complaint. I entered a string of numbers into the dialer, then calmly turned to him and inquired, do you have your ID with you? He covered his pocket with his hand and turned away. I nodded, my apologies. I forgot about the ID requirement for consultation. A chime sounded above us as the elevator doors opened. The call finally connected. I will be an hour late. They will get anxious and seek someone else. I was supposed to be on leave today, but a film crew had contacted the director, insisting on a reliable doctor as a consultant, thus compelling me to come in for overtime. I never anticipated stumbling upon this scene. Is everyone gathered? What are you doing? Getting married. 02. Zhou Shu forcefully shook off my hand. Gu Jian, who says I want to marry you? I picked up the discarded examination form, dusted it off, and looked at him helplessly. Why not get married since you're pregnant? His eyes widened as he retorted, why must one marry just because of a pregnancy? Didn't you say just yesterday that you could never accept an alpha partner? I furrowed my brow, gazing at him curiously. How can that be the same? For some reason, my reaction seemed to infuriate him. Suddenly, he delivered a powerful kick to the nearby tire, pointing at me with a furious outburst. Gu Jian, you heartless bastard. I poured my heart out to you, and you treat it as if it were nothing. Yet, when it comes to a child, you come rushing over. You shameless bastard. Let me tell you, Zhou Shu, even if I were to die on the operating table today, I will never marry you. You lunatic. Do you think I am a breeding stallion? I was well aware of his penchant for cursing, knowing it would not cease for at least half an hour. In such moments, there was often a swift solution. I glanced at my watch, then suddenly stepped closer, grasped the back of his head, and kissed him deeply. It was a prolonged kiss that nearly stole away our breaths, finally silencing him. He turned his back to me. Even with his mouth covered, the flush on his neck betrayed him. Shall we get married? I asked. He did not respond but merely opened the car door and sat inside. The door slammed shut with a resounding thud. 03. I first met Zhou Shu at a friend's wedding. He was the best man, dressed in a pristine white suit, with a slender waist and long legs, exceedingly handsome. By the end of the banquet, he had collected at least 20 phone numbers in his pocket. After witnessing him chew on ice for the 4th time, I handed him my business card. He glanced at it briefly, accepted it, and then teased, a handsome person like you resorts to such an old-fashioned way of flirting? I remained silent and took his pulse. 2 minutes later, under his amused gaze, I slowly spoke. Iron deficiency, anemia. The issue isn't severe. A few traditional Chinese medicines will suffice. I am a doctor at a private hospital. If you need anything, feel free to consult me. The smile on his lips suddenly froze. He surveyed me from head to toe, then chuckled, shaking his head, a clever play of wanting to catch and then let go. A friend called my name from a distance. I nodded goodbye to him and walked towards the exit. The scarf I had worn was left on the back of his chair. Shortly thereafter, I indeed found him in the hospital's consultation room. He nonchalantly draped the scarf over my arm, then propped himself on the chair, enveloping me in his embrace. Dr. Gu, your appointments are truly difficult to secure. I gently placed my hand on his wrist and after a moment said, the remedies online are unreliable. If you genuinely wish to do something, consume more red meat. He leaned down, whispering in my ear with a soft chuckle, and yet you claim not to like me, you even know that I don't enjoy meat. I casually jotted down a list of recommended foods on a sticky note, lifting my gaze to meet his as I replied, it's merely a common ailment among patients. His expression abruptly froze. I completed the prescription and returned his ID. The photograph depicted a younger version of him with a buzz cut, appearing somewhat innocent. Mr. Zhou. I glanced at the name on the card and said, "Eat more meat," in the literal sense. He left in a huff. That night he called me repeatedly, but when I answered, he remained silent, merely breathing heavily. He then visited my consultation room several times and called me late into the night. Finally, on one particular evening, a voice on the other end said, "Hello, are you a friend of Mr. Zhou? He is drunk. Could you come pick him up?" That night, we ended up entangled with each other. To be honest, it was my fault. Afterward, I sought him out to apologize, and we ended up together again. It was merely a couple of times. 04 Standing at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Zhou hesitated once more. I stood in front of the car, watching him with a hint of exasperation. "What's the matter? You know, I'm about to get married. Should I not mention this to my parents?" Upon hearing this, I was momentarily taken aback before realizing I needed to apologize. "My apologies. Having no parents, I often forget this detail. Perhaps we should reconsider not getting married. You can go back and inform your family. Should I bring something to present to your uncle and aunt as well? What do they like?" He stared at me for a while, then suddenly grasped my hand. "Let us go, we'll figure that out later." Upon obtaining our marriage certificate, we exchanged keys to our homes. "You were already anemic and Haven tea fully recovered. You need to replenish. I'll buy groceries when I get home tonight. Send me a message on WeChat if there's anything you want. I still need to return to the hospital." "Where are you headed?" His expression shifted drastically, as if harboring a deep-seated grudge, glaring at me furiously. "What's wrong? Is your stomach feeling unwell?" He raised his hand and punched me, angrily cursing, "Stomach, stomach. I knew you were a scoundrel." With that, he hailed a taxi and left me bewildered in the wind. I had been a doctor for many years, attending to various pregnant women and new parents. However, caring for a pregnant man, especially an alpha, was a first for me. Upon returning to the hospital, I did not immediately head to the director's office, but instead took a detour to the obstetrics and gynecology department. I brushed up on the essential care for husbands and inquired about foods that could help alleviate emotional stress during pregnancy. Pregnancy is inherently challenging, and he is an alpha. He is unfamiliar with this. "You shouldn't keep rushing to the hospital. Spend more time at home with your wife." I replied, "I would believe you if you pulled your eyes away from the research papers." "Oh please, your wife has already agreed. At worst, we can just assign you both a secondary role." 05 After the crew departed, I requested annual leave from the director. "Taking all 5 years of accrued leave at once? You might as well resign. The hospital is so busy. You are our star asset. What will I do if you leave? Dear Dr. Gu, do me a favor. I can always accompany my wife later. I need to earn money while I can." I approached his desk, rifling through the items until I seized a fountain pen and extracted a sheet of A4 paper from the printer. With a swift flourish, I penned 2 lines. Title: Resignation Letter. Content: I quit. Signature: Gu Jian. You've said this for 5 consecutive years. It was tolerable before, but not now. You must agree to either the resignation letter or the leave of absence application. The dean, in his 50s, was nearly bald. He glanced at me, exasperated, spinning in place twice, losing 3 more strands of hair in the process. Fine, let us go with leave, just not now. I've already made commitments to the production crew. It wouldn't be right to abandon them mid-project. How about this? Work for another 2 months, see the crew through, and then I'll grant you both maternity and annual leave. What do you think? Reluctantly, I acquiesced and exited the office. However, I was acutely aware that a temporary advantage would not secure a lasting one. These 2 months would likely be his window to find a replacement for me. Upon returning home, I found Zhou sprawled over the desk, surrounded by my medical textbooks from university, which he had scattered across the floor. He must have been puzzled as to how an alpha could possibly be pregnant. I shed my coat and retrieved a red blanket from beside the sofa, draping it over him. This very blanket was a Christmas gift from him, untouched since it had returned to its rightful owner. I turned and entered the kitchen, washed my hands and began preparing dinner. The house, designed without the foresight of welcoming a second occupant, featured an open layout with only the bathroom modestly enclosed by 4 walls. To avoid waking him, I moved as quietly as possible. I placed the beef in the pot, watching it boil as the savory aroma wafted through the air. Turning around, I found Zhou perched on the island, bleary-eyed and tilting his head to gaze at me. "Smells so good. What are you cooking?" tomato beef brisket, stir-fried broccoli, and spinach soup. He propped himself up on his arms. I love bean sprouts. I nodded, all right, I'll make them tomorrow. As the pressure cooker signaled the end of its countdown, I released the steam valve and ladled the soup into bowls. By the time the final dish was presented on the table, the chopsticks and bowls were already arranged. We sat across from each other, the essence of life palpable in that moment, akin to a pot of long-simmered old chicken soup. I couldn't help but think that marriage is, in fact, a splendid thing. In our humble abode, there was only one bed, and at night we naturally found ourselves lying together. Before his pregnancy, Zhou Shu conformed to society's stereotypes of an alpha, exuding the scent of cedar, the founder of a successful company, and possessing a commanding presence that was both alluring and intimidating. We were both unaccustomed to sharing our lives so intimately. Thus, lying in the same bed felt somewhat awkward. In the depths of the night, caught in a half-dream state, I sensed a hand roaming across my chest, the motions growing increasingly suggestive. Before matters escalated beyond control, I awoke. The room was suffused with the scent of cedar. Zhou Shu's body was flushed, contorted in discomfort. Without hesitation, I dialed a colleague in obstetrics, explaining the situation. He suggested I attempt to soothe him with pheromones. An omega in pregnancy tends to be exceedingly sensitive to the pheromones of any third party not related to the child's father. The intrusion of unfamiliar pheromones could lead to irritability, abdominal cramps, and in severe cases, fever, miscarriage, or unconsciousness. Yet he was already an alpha. We couldn't discern whether it was his own pheromones or mine that provoked him. Thus, we could only proceed cautiously. Fortunately, he did not resist my pheromones but gradually calmed down. After ending the call, I returned to bed, hesitant to revert to our previous separate sleeping positions. Instead, I wrapped my arms around him. Throughout the night, should he make even the slightest sound, I would randomly plant a kiss upon him. At last, we managed to navigate through a peaceful night. Upon returning to work, my first stop was the pheromone clinic to inquire about the situation. They, too, were baffled by the notion of an alpha being pregnant, a phenomenon so extraordinary it was almost unheard of. However, to be cautious, they suggested I could have a bottle of perfume made with my pheromones, which might help soothe my partner's emotions. This method was also employed by typical couples during pregnancy. Yet, as I walked home with the bottle of absinthe-scented perfume, I felt a peculiar sense of unease, a strange bitterness. I stowed the perfume in my bag and entered my home, inputting the code. The room was dark, and it was empty. A glance around revealed a desolate space, devoid of sound. I stubbornly checked the bathroom, the shower, and under the bed. Nothing was amiss. The only slight relief was that some of my belongings were also missing. The scent of our pheromones lingered on the bed, the cedar mingling with the bitterness of absinthe, intensifying the discomfort. I dialed phone numbers one after another, only to be met with silence. I began to contemplate whether we were haunted or perhaps burglarized. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my call was answered, and a groggy voice greeted me on the line. "Hello." I suppressed my panic and anger, asking, "Where are you?" "Where am I?" He seemed still half asleep, his voice thick with nasal congestion, almost playful. "I'm at home. I'm so hungry. When will you return?" Took me a moment to process his words. "Which home are you referring to?" "Of course, my own home. Your bed is too hard." I was so uncomfortable last night, as if something was gnawing at my head. I longed to clarify that it was not gnawing, but kissing. However, this was clearly not the time for such a discussion. I sighed, grabbed my car keys, and hurried out the door. While waiting for the elevator, I asked, "Are you feeling unwell? Any issues with your emotions or discomfort in your abdomen?" "Come on. I'm an adult. Can't I take care of myself? If you're so worried about the baby, why don't you carry it in your own belly?" I wanted to explain further, but the call had already ended. As the elevator descended from the 27th to the basement, I contemplated a pressing issue. Each time I mentioned the child or his health, Zhou Shu grew irate. As a patient, he shunned medical advice. As a pregnant male, he was excessively anxious. These were habits detrimental to his health. As a doctor, I should present facts and reason to him. Yet, as he pointed out, he was an adult and was not unaware of these truths. Often, emotions and reason are entirely unrelated, especially with hormonal fluctuations during pregnancy. As his husband, my role was to manage these emotions. Unfortunately, I lacked expertise in emotional handling, prompting me to contact a specialist for assistance. Zhou Shu answered the door barefoot. Upon seeing the rose and cream cake in my hands, his face brightened. A smile finally graced his features, lifting my spirits considerably. Truly, the saying each to their own holds merit. However, upon observing his feet, I couldn't suppress my frown. He rummaged through the shoe cabinet for slippers, emerging with a brand new pair, tags still attached. The robotic vacuum scuttled about the floor like a pet. The house, designed with a 2-story open layout, showcased expansive windows framing the swaying trees outside. The air was thick with the scent of cedar. Physiologically, alphas tend to resist the pheromones of their own kind. Yet psychologically, I couldn't help but recall those 2 nights, enveloped in the intoxicating aroma of cedar. Emotions clashed instinctively, and I caught a glimpse of Zhou Shu's bare nape. "Where's your suppressor patch?" "This is my home. Would you use a suppressor patch at home?" "Of course." I nodded without hesitation. "Oh," he clapped sarcastically, "then you must be really impressive." Immediately after, he held the vase he had arranged in front of me and smiled. "What do you think? Is it beautiful?" His demeanor rendered any anger towards him utterly futile. Amidst the vibrant blossoms, I beheld his smiling face. I nodded and replied, "It's beautiful." As a robot approached our feet, he didn't even glance up, stepping over it before continuing to fiddle with the box of cream cake. "How did you know I love mango? You claim not to like me, yet you know my preferences so well." I remained silent, gazing at his retreating figure for quite a while. Ultimately, I could no longer resist. I hoisted him up and tossed him onto the sofa. He attempted to escape. The cake box lay quietly on the coffee table. I casually pulled it towards me and secured him with a firm knot. Never underestimate a surgeon's ability and speed in tying knots. He continued to struggle, his bare feet kicking towards my chest. I seized his ankle and pinned it down. "You beast! I'm carrying your child. Let go of me, you brute. If you have the guts, let us have a fair fight instead of ambushing me. Why is it always me who gets suppressed? Let me go. I've been accommodating you all along. Have the courage to let me go and face me head-on." His mouth flapped incessantly. I leaned down and silenced him with a kiss. A fleeting, delicate kiss that left him momentarily stunned. He ceased his struggles and his shouting. Seizing the opportunity, I slipped a pair of socks onto his feet, followed by some slippers. "Adults should take better care of themselves," I remarked, releasing the ropes with a gentle pat on his backside. Until dinner was served, he maintained his silence. I didn't prepare his favored bean sprouts, and he barely touched his food, poking at the rice in his bowl with a sullen expression. "Gu Jian." He set down his chopsticks and looked at me. "Let us go home together. I'm on duty." His expression darkened further, though he was not angry. He stirred the bean sprouts in his bowl once more. I set down my chopsticks and rescued his bowl. "How about Saturday? I'm free then. We can go to the mall in the morning to pick out some gifts and return to your parents' house in the afternoon." His face immediately lit up with a grin. He was, after all, quite easy to please. That night, he slept restlessly, and before midnight, half of his body lay atop mine, his teeth gnawing and nibbling at my glands. The suppressor patch was torn apart, discarded beneath the bed. Ultimately, it was only after dousing the entire bed with that bottle of perfume that he was finally somewhat soothed. He curled up within the blanket, and I stepped into the bathroom, dousing myself with cold water from head to toe. When I emerged, he stirred awake. The first words he uttered were, "Let us move back to my place." On Friday morning, I had scarcely arrived at the hospital when I received a call from Zhang Ping. Zhang Ping was the groom I had met at the wedding where Zhou Shu was present. He invited me to a housewarming for his new home with his beta wife, wishing to gather a few friends to celebrate. "Don't say I didn't give you a chance. Zhou Shu will be there too. You like him, don't you? This is a great opportunity." The locker room door was ajar, and with one hand on my phone, I swiftly changed my clothes. On the door was a white ID photo, short hair, white shirt. Even in a passport photo, his smile was radiant. The image had been enlarged multiple times, rendering his features slightly blurred. If Zhou Shu were here, he would undoubtedly recognize it as his own ID photo. It was, in a sense, a misuse of public resources. The hospital's back end records all patient information, and any doctor can swiftly access it with just a name and ID number. Meanwhile, having just graduated from medical school, I had honed my ability to remember things with remarkable clarity. I removed the photo and pulled out a new one from my bag. It was from a few nights ago when Zhou Shu had been participating in a video conference at home, mumbling in a language I couldn't comprehend, wearing frameless glasses. At first glance, he appeared dapper in a suit and tie, But only I knew he was struggling beneath the table to kick off the cotton socks he had just donned. Feigning interest in the flowers, I was actually capturing his image. The roses were on the verge of wilting, while the newly purchased lisianthus adorned the table. I emerged from the changing room with my phone, casually asking, "Joshu? He prefers omegas, right? He did mention he likes soft, fragrant omegas more. But who said bitter alphas aren't appealing? Just try a taste and you'll know. Besides, there are other friends coming as well. If it doesn't work out, I can introduce you to other omegas." I casually brushed it off, neither agreeing nor refusing, merely stating I would decide based on circumstances. After hanging up, a memory surfaced. Just a few nights prior, he had once again succumbed to drunkenness at a bar. When I went to pick him up, he leaned against me, lamenting, "Ah, omegas are the best. Absinthe is utterly repugnant." That night, I tossed and turned, lost in thought. It wasn't until the first rays of dawn broke that I finally resolved to let go. Perhaps without this child, it would indeed be over. This child might be the reincarnation of a fateful connection. No matter how delightful other omegas may be, none could rival the weight of a marriage certificate. On my way home that evening, I received another call from Zhang Ping. He sounded somewhat remorseful, saying, "I'm sorry. It seems I misspoke. I mentioned to Zhou Shu that I wanted to introduce you to, and for some reason, he got angry and blocked my number. I apologize. I intended to gauge his interest, but it seems I misstepped." When I received this call, I didn't think much of it. After all, Zhou Shu had been prone to anger lately, but I believed it was something that could be resolved. However, upon returning home, I found he had vanished. The marriage certificate lay shredded on the living room floor. He hadn't even taken his pheromone perfume with him. I searched both his home and his workplace, but he was nowhere to be found. My phone was blocked, my WeChat was blocked, and even my Alipay was blocked. I could only rally friends to search for him in places he frequented. By 3 in the morning, just as I stepped into the police station, I received a familiar call. "Hello, Mr. Gu. Your friend has passed out in front of my establishment." When I arrived, he was sprawled in the bar owner's lounge, clutching a bottle of absinthe, taking swigs and cursing, "Scumbag, beast, may you forever be impotent. You little brat. I must have been blind to fall for you." The owner informed me that he had hidden in the newly opened KTV down the street to avoid being found, only to drunkenly stumble and collapse at the bar's entrance. I snatched the bottle from his hands and hoisted him onto my back. We staggered home, illuminated by the shadows of streetlights, while he continued his tirade. Eventually, his mind dulled, and all he could do was repeat his curses. I changed him into fresh clothes and laid him on the bed, preparing sobering tea in the kitchen while calling my obstetrician colleagues. Although it's generally advised against drinking alcohol during pregnancy, drunkenness is particularly detrimental. Just to be safe, a hospital checkup would be best. But he also reminded me. He came to the hospital this afternoon and inquired about the latest time I could terminate the pregnancy. His mood was rather somber, and I suggested that you two should have a heartfelt conversation. As I prepared the hangover soup and carried it out, he had already regained consciousness. He retrieved his own clothes from the washing machine, disregarding whether they were damp, and made to leave. I grasped his wrist to stop him, but he effortlessly shrugged me off. I swept him into my arms, yet he became as rigid as a steel beam. When I embraced him, he retaliated with a kick that sent me kneeling to the ground. He cast a fleeting glance back at me before continuing to stride toward the exit. "Zhou Shu." I called out his name loudly. "What on earth do you intend to do?" He halted but did not turn around, his voice laced with a chilling detachment. "Gu Jian, let us get a divorce. I no longer wish to have this child." I propped myself against the wall, questioning, "Why? At least grant me a reason." "Because I have no affection for children, nor for you. Having this child will bind us for the rest of our lives, forcing us to coexist with someone we do not cherish. Didn't you say you didn't want to be with an alpha? That Omega Zhangping introduced to you would be splendid. He can bear you children, he won't suffer from pheromone intolerance, he won't walk barefoot on the ground, and he won't be picky about food. He can fulfill all your desires." A bitter taste welled up in my mouth. After a lengthy silence, I regained my voice. "But you said you would take me home. That was then, this is now." The air was thick with bitterness, emotions settling into a heavy silence. He rummaged through the pockets of his coat and produced a bank card. "Thank you for your help during this time. Consider it a token of gratitude." As his fingertips barely left the card, I seized his wrist, pulling him into my embrace. Whether it's walking barefoot or being a picky eater, those are not valid reasons for our separation. Zhou Shu, admit it. You're merely jealous. He clenched his fists, placing them between our bodies. Who's jealous? I don't even like you. I softly acknowledged, grasping his hand and pulling him closer. It is I who cherish you. He paused for a few seconds before suddenly burying his face in my shoulder. Within moments, my shoulder was damp with his tears. In his presence, I dialed Zhang Ping. Zhou Shu is just going through a phase. He has quite the temper. I never insisted on an introduction, and running away was unnecessary. We had not disclosed Zhou Shu's pregnancy to anyone. He was still struggling to accept it, and allowing more people to know would only add to his pressure, serving no purpose. Moreover, there had never been a precedent for an alpha pregnancy, and should any complications arise, it would spare us the need for explanations. Zhou Shu lay on my lap, gently toying with my earlobe. Once the call ended, I firmly held his hand behind his back. If you keep fidgeting, you will face consequences. I'm not afraid. He defiantly raised his chin. I'm pregnant. What can you do to me? I chuckled softly, lifting his chin and leaning down to peck his lips. I've said a little discomfort 1T hurt. After all, that's what mouths are for. His pupils dilated as he fixed his gaze upon me. I laughed louder and kissed him again before lifting him horizontally and carrying him to the bed. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to the hospital for a checkup, and we have to return home in the afternoon. It's time to sleep now. No. He tugged at my sleeve. Was it just like that? Like what? I feigned innocence, leaving him exasperated. He slammed a fist into the pillow and then buried his head under the covers. After turning off the lights, I habitually sprayed perfume on the bed. In the darkness, my wrist was suddenly grasped, and I found myself nestled against a chest. I'm sick of this awful perfume. Let me suffer a little. No. I pressed a finger against his forehead. You are a pregnant male now. Abstinence is required. During the last checkup, due to a lack of expectations regarding the child's father, only a blood test was conducted. However, this time, to assess the risk of fetal abnormalities, several additional tests were performed. We had essentially checked everything possible. While waiting for the results, we bought gifts at the mall and decided to have lunch nearby. In the afternoon, before we even reached the hospital, I received a call from a colleague. Xiaogu, hurry here. The child is gone. Those words sent Zhou Shu into a panic, and we rushed to the hospital. Upon reviewing the tests, we discovered that the previous diagnosis had been erroneous. Zhou Shu was not pregnant at all. To call it a misdiagnosis was misleading, as his hormone levels and pheromone HCG content were indeed in disarray. The comprehensive examination indicated that he was likely unwell, with the most apparent symptom being his rejection of the pheromones. It resembled an allergic reaction, albeit not entirely, as allergies typically manifest internally, whereas Zhou Shu, aside from being allergic to that particular pheromone, was irresistibly attracted to those of other alphas. It was akin to a precursor to secondary differentiation. However, secondary differentiation usually occurs relatively quickly. He had been in turmoil for several months, and his glands had not transitioned towards omega. It was suspected to be a new type of pheromone disorder. The colleague who had been treating Zhou Shu suddenly appeared aged, scratching his head as he gazed at his written notes, sighing heavily. The good news was that Zhou Shu's condition could still be documented for a paper. The bad news was that it would become a thesis in the pheromone clinic, rendering his previous work futile. We arrived at Zhou Shu's home half an hour later than anticipated. Yet when we arrived, his parents greeted us warmly. The table was laden with dishes, all either my favorites or Zhou Shu's. Guilt washed over me as I continuously apologized throughout the meal. It feels just like home, I remarked. When Zhou Shu was pursuing you, he mentioned to us that he really wanted to introduce you. But Zhou Shu said you were too shy to bring you home. We were quite anxious. Please bear with our enthusiasm. I glanced at Zhou Shu with a slight tilt of my head. Pursuing me? When did that occur? Was it during those hundreds of phone calls? That hardly seemed like courtship. It felt more like a relentless chase. Rather than pursuing, I preferred to describe our love as a mutual enticement. The distinction was subtle, yet at times it blurred. He chuckled softly, silently placing a piece of rib into my bowl. I returned the rib to his bowl, earning a sprout of stir-fried bean sprouts in return. I had never understood why Zhou Shu loved bean sprouts so much until I tasted his mother's cooking. The dishes were more delectable than the meat, and the bean sprouts were the best. Since we both relished them, Zhou Shu's mother filled a large bag for us to take home. We could freeze it and eat for half a month. Such was a mother's profound love. Upon returning home, he lay restlessly on the bed, tossing and turning. I placed the food in the refrigerator and, upon emerging, discovered that he had already begun to zone out. I then retrieved a change of clothes, preparing to take a shower. The bathroom was enveloped in a warm mist. Just as I was washing my hair, the door swung open unexpectedly. Our eyes met, and I felt a wave of embarrassment while he appeared utterly unabashed. With a mischievous chuckle, he charged towards me. In mere moments, his shirt was discarded. He reached up to turn off the showerhead and then descended upon me with a deep kiss. The humidity thickened the air, making it difficult to breathe. I grasped his waist, pulling him away from me. The doctor advised you to rest and to avoid significant fluctuations in your pheromones. The acoustics of the bathroom amplified my voice, as well as his labored breaths, surrounding me completely. Then let us make today a bit more strenuous, he replied, his touch feather-light against my throat, soon enveloped by his warm, damp embrace. He lifted his gaze to meet mine, his eyes glistening with moisture. It was no wonder my resolve wavered. Few could resist such a beguiling stare. I hastily rinsed my hair and tugged him back to the bedroom. In the compact space, the bedroom seamlessly transitioned into the kitchen, which in turn flowed into the living area. Before the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's nightscape sprawled magnificently. He turned back to me with a smile. My windows are quite large. What do you mean? You should come to my place next time. In response, I offered a kiss that was even more fervent. After obtaining our marriage certificate, we were to plan a wedding. It wasn't until a month later, prompted by the reminders from Joe's parents, that we remembered this obligation. My annual leave was also nearing its commencement. Although we had lost the child, our honeymoon plans remained intact. However, we encountered difficulties while arranging the wedding venue. Joe Shu had few friends and I had even fewer. If we were to invite only close relatives, a larger private room would suffice for the two of us. Yet, our parents' generation favored grand celebrations, believing that the more guests, the merrier, and that a wedding should be widely celebrated for a long-lasting union. With this sentiment in mind, we endeavored to gather a crowd. Eventually, he proposed a solution: to broadly distribute invitations, requesting only blessings and no monetary gifts. This strategy proved remarkably effective. The venue buzzed with activity, making it impossible to count the attendees. His employees and clients mingled with my hospital colleagues. We exchanged rings, and this fragile silver circle would henceforth encapsulate our intertwined lives. Once the formalities concluded, we joined our guests on the dance floor. Suddenly, he nudged my arm, directing my attention to a man at the dining table who was stealthily plucking flower petals to eat. "Isn't this indicative of some kind of illness?" I shot him a glance. "Aren't you insulting him?" "If I were to insult him, I would do so openly," he retorted. I pondered this for a moment, only to be playfully punched into submission. Casting a glance in that direction, I remarked, "Let us just have someone inform him later. We'll continue dancing." He looked puzzled. "Aren't you concerned? Why should I care about him? Aren't you supposed to have a professional ailment? You always notice such things." He suddenly halted, staring at me in astonishment. "You were plotting against me back then." I pecked him on the lips. "One cannot help but yearn for beautiful things. Then I told you from the start that you liked me, and you wouldn't admit it." "I never denied it." "You're incorrigible." I tilted his chin, hovering just an inch from his lips. "I won't concede." As the words fell, our lips met. Above us, dazzling fireworks illuminated the night sky. The story concludes here. Thank you for listening. We shall meet again in our next tale.